Okay, everyone, so we'll make a start. First of all, I'd just like to thank you all for logging into this session. This is a brief session I've organised. It's called Give Formal Presentations and Take Part in Meetings. I'd like to say hello to Ryan, Craig and David. You've all logged in. Two of you are based in Victoria, one in New South Wales. But thanks again for joining us. Today, basically, this presentation is about organising formal presentations and actually actively participating in meetings to ensure that they're successful. So they will be the two learning objectives for this session. If you would like to find out some more information about the learning objectives, just take a look at the training.gov website. So information about the unit of competency is all on that website. If you scroll down to the very bottom, or pretty much the very bottom, you'll see the required skills and knowledge to be deemed competent in such a course, and also the different performance criteria, which I've also noted on this session plan for you. So a little bit of a rundown about what will be covered today. I just need to double check too that everyone can hear me before I continue. Can I just get a yes from everyone one by one? Yep, Craig? Yep. Perfect. David and Ryan, you're good to go as well. Just double check that you've got the system on mute if possible, because what actually happens is we get some feedback coming through and that affects the recording as well. Brilliant. So a little bit of a rundown about what will be covered today. Today we'll give an outline about what is an agenda and why it's so important. We'll take a look at why it's important to prepare, communicate, control and document aspects of meetings. And I'll provide you a little bit of a rundown of a template, a potential template that you can use for meetings to ensure that they're professional and that they run on time. We'll watch a video or two about tips for successful meetings and giving presentations effectively, and how to actually overcome your fear of giving a presentation. I'll give you some tips related to that too. A couple of presentations too as examples. We'll run through some examples of presentations, and also the importance of acknowledging sources when giving presentations. And that tends to be using Harvard MLA or APA style referencing, being consistent with your approach to doing that. Alright, so the first image I'd like to show you is this picture. So what we've got here on the screen is a road, which is a windy road heading into the abyss, and it twists around and around. I thought that this was a good picture to show you because it gives a good metaphor for the meaning of a roadmap. And a roadmap is all about giving you a sense of direction. A roadmap gives you a sense of what your future would entail and potentially objectives that you'd like to fulfill before you reach the end of that road. That roadmap itself, in a way, defines the meaning of an agenda. So the whole purpose of having a meeting agenda is to ensure that everyone knows what will be discussed at that meeting, to demonstrate to them what the entire objective of that meeting is, or what the overall mission of the meeting is, who will cover what, and also any outcomes related to what was covered in the meeting, or any action items are discussed too. It ensures that everyone is on the same page, and that of course is why it's so important to organise an agenda for your meetings. So pretty good image, that one. Okay, so having a meeting agenda, that's important to actually prepare in advance of the meeting itself. So give people an opportunity to provide feedback or have input into the meeting well before the meeting actually begins. You want to ensure that they're comfortable with what will be covered in the meeting, and you want to ensure that that's communicated effectively to them before the meeting starts. Now, during the meeting itself, when the meeting starts, you want to be able to have some structure, and that agenda provides that structure. So you might have the first agenda to discuss what occurred over the past week. The second agenda might relate to different ways to improve policies, specific policies or elements of the business. The closing agenda might relate to what happened last week or potentially what is expected for next week. And of course, documenting those things is important too. So let's take a look at what an agenda looks like. Okay, so this is a really good example of a simple and effective agenda that could be used for meetings. Now, I've taken this agenda from the officetemplatesonline.com website, so the exact website itself is that one right there. And I thought this was a really good outline of setting up a meeting agenda. So at the very top, we come up with a name for the meeting, something which is descriptive and outlines the purpose of the meeting, the date and time of the meeting, who will be running the meeting too is covered at the top. So who will chair the meeting and guide people to what is to be discussed or what the next topic that needs to be covered. The location, where do you go? Is the meeting itself held in the business, or do you actually need to travel somewhere for it? Or is it an online meeting like we've organised today? And overall, what is the key objective for the meeting? Now, it could be worthwhile to have an attendees list as well, and that's really useful because you don't want to start the meeting prematurely before the majority of people have attended. You want to give people some leeway to log in, but also you don't want people who have already logged in or people who have already attended the meeting to wait too long, because after all, they've actually attended on time. It's quite a respectful thing to take into consideration their time with that meeting. Email and telephone numbers are quite useful too. You want to be able to contact those people after the meeting or leading up to the meeting with any potential changes. You want to follow up on action items too, and in order to do that, you need their contact details. This is a really good section here to talk about the meeting agenda. Now, the meeting agenda can be separated by topic, category. A really good idea to assign a presenter to that meeting agenda, and also a specific amount of time to talk about what they need to talk about, because otherwise it will simply drag on, and a half an hour meeting will balloon into a 1.5 hour meeting. It's incredible to see how fast the meetings change shape without a preset agenda. And other information as well, leave some room down the bottom to take notes, but also to follow up on action items with regards to that meeting as well. So these links, I'll provide you these links in the subject plan. I'll send those to you by email too. Okay, so just to continue, I've got a really good video I've come across. Now, this video I've come across on YouTube. It basically runs through the key tips to running a successful meeting. Now, some of those tips I've already discussed, but I think it's a really good summary, and I'm going to play this for you right now.
Hi, welcome to Business with Bob. Today, I'd like to look at how to start a meeting effectively. The first success factor is preparation. Now, by preparation, I mean much more than just getting the logistics right, room and coffee. Preparation for me is a people management issue with many dimensions. Preparation is about giving and getting information before the meeting. Participants need to be informed about the objectives and their roles. It may mean extensive email contact, or better, telephone calls, just to get everyone on the same page. Another important part of preparation is to make sure that key decision makers are present. Now, these people, usually senior management, will always be too busy. So convince them to be there. If they don't come, there may be no point even starting the meeting. So, you've prepared well. Now let's talk about starting. Be there in plenty of time to welcome everyone. If it's a meeting with a lot of new people, get a colleague to support you with early small talk. It really helps to set a positive tone. When it comes to formally opening the meeting, take your time. I've seen so many meetings fail because the setup was poor. Take your time to express positive thoughts about the participants and the excellent results which can result from effective collaboration. Take your time to talk not only about objectives, but also about benefits. Remember, international business is so often about change that you have constantly to send positive messages in meetings to people who find this change difficult. And take time to clarify the process. Is it a brainstorming? Is it a meeting where the leader decides or the group can decide? Is the meeting to take a final decision, or is it just a first step? So, prepare and take your time at the start to create a solid platform. And I know it takes time. I know you're going to say that you don't have time, but do it, or the meeting could turn out to be a total waste of time.
Okay, so not a bad video there summarising those key points that I just discussed. Just taking a look at the clock, this is a fast track 30-minute session, so we're about halfway through that now. So I would just like to touch base with everyone and ask if anyone has any questions. If you could just say your name and then your question through the microphone, that will be great, and we can clarify any aspects. Oh, yes, Craig, yep. No, not at all. Craig's just asked a question. He's basically wanting to know, is it necessary to organise an agenda for every meeting? And in quite a fast response, I said no, and that's because not every meeting requires an agenda. Meetings that are informal, very short meetings between individual colleagues, touch base meetings, or if you just going over to a colleague to ask a couple of questions, it's not necessary to have an agenda, and in fact that would be a waste of time of organising the agenda in the first place, because you're simply going over to ask a question as opposed to discuss major points. Use your judgment when it comes to creating agendas and organising meetings. Having too many meetings can get in the way of organising daily business. But not having enough meetings could potentially mean that you're doing the wrong thing or you're off track, staff aren't too sure what to do, and it could potentially affect the motivation of the team. Yeah. Any other questions there? Okay, yep. No worries. Alright, so just quickly, we do have another section as well that I'd like to touch upon, and that is a quick background about giving presentations. And I think before we even take a look at the video for this, I do need to say, before you give a presentation, determine what the purpose of that presentation is and who your audience is. If you don't understand those two things relating to a presentation, if it's a speech or if it's talking in the office to colleagues or if it's a boardroom meeting, if you don't understand what the purpose is for that presentation and you don't understand the audience, you're going to be giving an ineffective presentation. But let's take a look at the video that I've organised for this session for you as well.
This is Elle. She's helping the girls get ready for a big night out when their straighteners can't cut it.
Hi, I'm Antonio Centeno, the founder of Real Men Real Style. Today we're going to be talking about 5 tips that you can use to deliver an awesome presentation. Okay, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. By doing that, these videos will come right to you. In addition, if you like this video, if you find it useful, please click on the like button down below. And last but not least, if you want to learn more about men's style and presenting in general, I've got a free 47-page ebook that's mostly about men's style, but we also, in other places I will talk about presentations. In fact, I'm going to link you to an article on presentations right down there. Okay, so let's get to what are my 5 tips so that you can deliver an awesome presentation. 1, you need to practice. Number 2, you need to keep the audience, keep the listeners engaged. Number 3, you need to keep it simple and sweet. Number 4, properly use visuals. And number 5, you need to bring it. Okay, so let's talk about practice. You hear this all the time. I'm not bringing up anything new, but really, no one can wing it. Of course, there are people like Tony Robbins who gets off an airplane, he goes right to the stage, but he's thinking about what he's going to cover, and he's practiced hundreds, if not thousands, probably thousands of times. If you're new to speaking in front of an audience, and most of us don't get in front of, aren't professional speakers, you need to practice, and you need to practice a lot, especially if you don't know what, or you haven't done this for a long time. Because if you lock up in front of an audience, it's different. When in front of a camera, I can go over there and I can restart this. And in fact, this video, I've probably restarted 4 times. But at the end of the day, I control it. With an audience, you don't. You don't want to lock up. And so let me give you an example. When I was interviewing in business school, I went to this really high-end consulting company, and they brought me into a hotel, and I was sitting there with a consultant. We were having a nice conversation, and all of a sudden he turns on the interview, and he starts asking me very difficult business questions, which I didn't even know half of the stuff that he's talking about. And I wasn't prepared for it, and it just caught me, and I froze up. Now, the reason I told you that story is actually I'm leading us to part 2. So we've talked about preparation. Now it's grabbing attention. Do you notice how when I told you that story about the consulting interview, you immediately probably tuned a bit more into this video? That's because I grabbed your attention. I shared with you an experience, which is true, by the way, but it's one that you can relate to because you've locked up. You've had instances in which you're having somebody talk to you in a language that you're just totally lost on. So don't be afraid to find a way to bring the audience in. And one of the best ways is a story. And you're going to need to do this every 10 to 15 minutes because you can't just give people tons of information. You can give them information for a few minutes, but after 10 to 15 minutes, you need to bring them back with a story or bring them back with a visual. Step away from the information and really, you're addressing a different part of the brain and you need to wake people up because your information may be great, may be beautiful, but you're going to put them to sleep. So let's talk about number 3. Keep it simple and sweet. YouTube's great about this. You'll notice most of the videos on YouTube are like 3 to 5 minutes long. Beyond that, you want to keep it simple and sweet. So if you've got a longer presentation, let's say that's busting 35, going up to 60 minutes, really look at, do you need to use that full 60 minutes? Just because they give you 60 minutes does not mean you have to use the full 60 minutes. Okay, now let's talk about visuals. PowerPoint is overused I remember when PowerPoint first came out and it was like, wow, that's really cool. And before that, we were all using what the overheads and projectors. PowerPoint is awesome, but it is so overused. You don't have to use PowerPoint. Think about your visuals need to serve you. You don't want to serve your visuals. So never just read off of PowerPoint. That is, if you're going to use PowerPoint, use it to get the main points across. You never want to read directly from the slide. Look over at your PowerPoint, maybe pull 1 or 2 notes from it, but somebody should not be able to read your PowerPoint and know exactly what the presentation was about. So make sure, again, that you control your visuals and that your visuals do not control you. Finally, bring it. And, the whole thing here is make sure you bring your A game, be excited, because if you're not passionate about what you're talking about, if you're not excited, why should your audience be? Okay, this has been Antonio Centeno with Real Men, Real Style. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Okay, another great video there as well, giving you the 5 main tips there for giving presentations. I'd just like to talk a little bit now about the fear of giving presentations. And I was once quite afraid of giving presentations myself. I would get quite jittery. I would sweat. My knees would wiggle. I'd get lost and I wasn't too sure what to say. I also had difficulty with giving eye contact to the audience. Practice, practice, practice is probably my biggest tip when it comes to giving presentations. Understand what you're going to be talking about. You don't have to learn it verbatim. It's not necessary to go in and memorize a script to then say to the audience, because then it will simply sound like you're actually reading the script. They'll get bored, they'll tune out, and they won't know what you've said. They'll simply tune out all your ideas that you've just spoken about. All your language will just go in one ear and out the other. So I think the key thing is preparation for your presentations, not saying too much, sticking to the main points, sticking to the time of the presentation as well. In terms of common presentations, you just saw 2 gentlemen speak on 2 different videos. Now, the gentleman who spoke on the second video, he was giving a speech, a pre-prepared speech. He did mention that he recorded that a few times. Now, not all the presentations you give will be able to be recorded. You might be able to record some of them, but your best presentations will typically be your interactive presentations. That is when you say something to your respondents, you say something to your audience, and they come back at you with questions. They ask for feedback, you interact, you engage in role plays and discussions. Those type of presentations are typically the most effective. You can also have presentations that are, I suppose, shorter, one-on-one presentations too at work. I mean, all these are examples of presentations. Can anyone there think of any examples of presentations that you had difficulty with? Yep, giving speeches. Yeah, that's definitely common. Talking on the radio. Was that you, Ryan? When did you do that? Oh, really? Did you use the tickets? Oh, okay. All right. So Ryan was just saying that he spoke on the radio. There were some tickets going for a cruise. He entered a competition with a radio station. And he actually had to speak on air to get those tickets. So he was a little bit fearful of doing that. Yeah, I mean, definitely practice. That's the only thing that I could really suggest with that. The more you speak, the more you practice, the better you get. Yeah. And definitely the last thing that I want to cover too before we wrap up this session is the importance of referencing. Now, referencing is important because if you don't reference someone's ideas, then technically you're plagiarising. And a lot of organisations are fine with plagiarism. Plagiarism isn't illegal in Australia. It's not illegal. Unless, of course, you're stealing someone's marketing idea or you're copying or defrauding a company. But plagiarism itself is unethical and we need to avoid doing it as much as possible. Plagiarism doesn't have to be intentional. People often do it by mistake. But in order to avoid that, you can reference the ideas of other people. And the three key referencing styles that are used, well, in an academic sense, and typically in some organisations, they are Harvard, MLA, and APA, American Psychological Association. Now, these all have different styles. However, it is important to remain consistent with your particular style. So choose one referencing method or type of referencing, choose one of them and stick to it. So I'm going to show you, I do have Harvard and MLA there. You can click on those links and take a look at in your own time. I'm more familiar with APA, so let's take a look at that. Now, this was provided by University of South Queensland. Now, pretty much every single university will have, they'll provide links or they'll provide guidelines about referencing. Now, the most common reference would be a web link. Now, a lot of things are coming off the internet, so web documents and sites. Something like this. So this here is a government publication. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare 2011. Australia's Health 2004, retrieved from that website. So you've got the website, where you got it from. You've got the author, Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. The year that it was published, not the year it was accessed, the year that it was published. Australia's Health 2004, retrieved from that website. So that way, you have identified who came up with the idea, or who published it, and where it's from. And you can backtrack, and you can keep on track of your work. That's really important because it's respecting the people who actually came up with that information. Now, you've got other sources as well. You've got electronic media. You've got another list at the very top here. We've got legislation, unpublished works, course materials. There's a whole heap of different references, referencing styles that can be used for those. And all these can be found on the web. So I encourage you to take a look at the web and also take a look at any of your educational institutions. Take a look at your your employers access to these sites, because often they like a particular style, either Harvard or APA, they're the most common, or MLA. Yeah, so that's basically it for this session. Today was nice and short and sweet. Basically, the key elements that need to be covered relating to the agenda, organising meetings, ensuring meeting conventions are followed. We covered that. Ensure that you've got a specific order of things to do and you know what you're going to talk about if you attend a meeting. We also discussed about having objectives, clear missions for organising meetings. That it's not always important to have an agenda, but in most business meetings lasting for more than 15 minutes, it could be quite worthwhile to have an agenda. In terms of the second objective for today, we did talk about the importance of giving presentations that are accurate and structured, and ensuring that the key content is included. You can't discuss everything, you can only discuss the key points. Ensuring that people are engaged and motivated to listen, and most of all, ensuring that any sources or information that is discussed is acknowledged. You're being ethical in the way you're acknowledging it. So thank you very much for your time today, everyone. Feel free to stick around after this presentation and have a chat. And any questions, feel free to flick me an email as well.